Thomas Zayn is an enigma wrapped in contradictions and misunderstanding. Normally, as new information comes into a story, things become clearer. However, it seems Tom has a way of fogging up the glass every time we see him. What is his story? Villain or victim? Poet or filmmaker? His story constantly changes. His personality varies every time he appears on screen. After all of this time, I frankly still have not been able to wrap my head around him. My previous video on the 2 Tom Zayn theory was released before Alan Wake 2. Now, with additional information, his story seems to be even more confusing. Part of the confusion surrounding the character results from his constantly shifting narrative. Between Tom the poet, Tom the filmmaker, and even Tom the diver, we get different appearances and characterizations. Each seems to possess a different backstory as well. The first being the one in the 1970s who released the Dark Presence after his girlfriend drowned in the lake. The next being the one trapped in the dark place and actively pulling underhanded tactics to use Alan to escape. And the last being a character within Departure who acted as Alan's guide and was played by the Bright Presence. But there is another Tom that is largely forgotten, one that, oddly enough, was mentioned in Alan Wake 2. In the town of Watery, on a poster in Swomey Hall, we see an advertisement for an upcoming event, with the title, The Dark Doppelganger in the Art and Life of Thomas Zayn. We see a list of what it says are his dark doubles. The poet, the writer, the diver, and the barely remembered Thomas the Rhymer. For many, this title has little to no meaning, but it tracks all the way back to the first Remedy title, Death Rally. For those who are observant, a poster for Death Rally can be found in the Cauldron Lake Lodge in Emerson's room. Coincidentally, Thomas Emerson appears on the very same poster, named as the president of the Bright Falls Film Society. It also appears in one of the rooms within a different lodge in Alan Wake 2. You see, the character of Tom appeared before he was first properly introduced in Alan Wake. He has been around since the beginning. During Death Rally, the protagonist is entered into a series of death races, working his way to the top in order to face an enemy known only as the Adversary, and given the title, the Flame-Crowned Demon King of the race. At some point in the past, a racer named Tom challenged the Adversary and lost. It is implied in other entries that the Demon King trapped Tom's soul, binding it to the race in some form. By the time the protagonist gets his first vehicle, true Tom begins to speak to him through the car radio, acting as a spirit guide.
Perk up. This is a free news flash. I am true Tom Rhymer, and I know the road. I got petrol in my veins. I got wind in my engine-oiled hair. I've been where you are now, hotshot. Thunder Boy, young blood. I've been farther down the road than you'll ever get.
His words here bring to mind the relationship between Tom the Diver and Alan Wake, an older writer who has explored the depths, going farther than the young writer ever has or will. Besides this, he is constantly making allusions that the relationship between the driver and the car is that of soul and body, calling himself True Tom because he cannot tell a lie. His language is poetic, voicing is short, to the point, abrupt.
And the bullets take the sky like a cloud of locusts. The end is nigh. Race over. Get it? Butta butta butta. You have been warned. Ride your machine, your motor war chariot. Go for that grail. Only one can be the king of the race, the fastest man on the track, the number one. And there are plenty of takers. Gas is the only pedal. Floor it. You have been warned. You want to know it's safe? Listen to True Tom. This is the score. Things can get out of hand real speedy like. I'm talking about the world lighting up, shining blast white, and then nothing. I'm talking about going out in a blaze of glory. You have been warned.
With the exception of the arcade cabinets and Barry making a reference to it, there are no details about how this may or may not tie into the other games. It could be as simple as a video game that exists within the RCU, one that the characters are familiar with considering we see it as arcades within the other games. However, with The Dark Place, inspiration is a funny thing. Who made the game? What inspired it? And why was Thomas the Rhymer, aka True Tom, referenced? To get a clue, we must leave the RCU behind and look at the origin of this character. There is an untold history of a poet named Tom that predates Remedy. In fact, it predates modern media. This story begins in the 13th century, in County Berwick on the border between Scotland and England. Located near the village of Earlston in a castle which has the nickname of Rhymer's Tower. It is named for one of the rumored residents named Thomas Learmont. Tom was a 13th century bard from the region who bore titles that should be familiar: True Thomas and Thomas the Rhymer. There is a bit of folklore surrounding this poet. It is said that one day he was outside of town, lying against a tree, and had an unexpected guest. Upon him came the Queen of Elfland riding on a horse and invited him to join her. She shows him 3 roads, one leading to heaven, one leading to hell, and one which led to her own world. The Queen and the poet took this final road, and Thomas the Rhymer vanished into Elfland. After his departure, he spent 7 years in this world. Once that time was up, and upon his return, he asks the Queen something to remember her by. He settles on the gift of prophecy. From that point forward, this prophetic gift was intrinsically linked with his poetry. It was believed his poems could foretell the future. There are examples attributed to him such as the death of Alexander III. In order to ensure his reputation amongst those who heard his poetry, the Queen of Elfland is said to bestow upon him a tongue that could tell no lie, hence the nickname True Thomas. From there, he spent several years in his home world. In some versions of the story, he was busy entertaining an earl when the village began to cry out that a hart and a hind was marching through town. This stag and deer traveled directly to the home of Thomas. Taking this as a sign, the poet followed them into the woods and was never seen properly again. It is suggested the deer acted as a guide, leading him back into Elfland, never to return. However, some claim to have caught glimpses of Thomas the Rhymer, but only on his terms, allowing himself to be seen only by those he chooses. It is apparent from this story that Remedy took a great deal of inspiration from the story of Thomas Learmont when designing the original version of Thomas Zayn, a poet who, from an outside observer, has the gift of prophecy, a power gained from communion with another world. Given the titles of True Tom and Thomas the Rhymer, even the timeline of his travels line up. The fabled poet vanished into another world for 7 years before returning. Tom the poet vanished into the lake in 1970. Alan Wake was born 7 years later in 1977. Even the imagery of deer acting as guides to the unknown is reflected here, not only with Deerfest, but also Saga being guided by one within the lodge. These similarities may act only as inspiration, or they may serve as a template for future stories. I'll leave that for the community to ponder. But one thing seems to be clear: True Tom Rhymer, the voice in the car radio, speaks truth. His writing style short and blunt. No wasted space.
The style then. Lose the fat. Make it clear. Ugly. Functional. Present. Be blunt. Only the brutal truth. I've written and rewritten. Deconstructed, reconstructed. Experimented with different voices. Changed the style. Changed myself.
He constantly warned the protagonist, ending his transmissions with, "You have been warned." Where have we heard that before?
Things set in motion. If the alarm's true, then so is the reason for the alarm. The effect must follow the cause. It's happening again. A return. You have been warned.
Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed, please drop a like and subscribe to receive updates on future uploads. If you would like to help support the channel, a Patreon has been set up and the link is in the description below. Have a great day and peace be with you all.